So I've been basically working as an artist in the entertainment field for about 15, 16 years, maybe 17. I don't know, a long time at this point. Kind of losing track of exactly how many years, but yeah, in a number of industries. I worked in film, I worked in games, animation. Did dabbled in theme parks, comics, um, some movie poster development, toys, and yeah, kind of covered a wide spectrum of industries as an artist. So does that is that what you're looking for, or do you want you want me to dive down in more specifics, or
Now that suffices, man. So yeah, I mean, you definitely been in the industry for a long time, and I wanted to appreciate the different types of industries that you've been in. I think you're one of the few
right?
friends and colleagues that I've had that pretty much touch, I think, every types of medium and expressions of art in other industries that utilizes your particular skill.
Right.
Um, can you expand that on that bit where we're talking? He's being a little modest. He's been in the industry over like what 20 years now. Been around
Yeah,
15
around
years.
around that. Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my first, I guess, major gig was Lucasfilm. I worked directly with George Lucas for like 3 years, and then we moved on to work with Doug Chang on a few things, eventually getting me onto Rogue One. And yeah, so I worked in a number of film projects, and then transitioned into comics, where I was able to work with Dave Gibbons on a project, and yeah, a number of other developments. So good stuff.
So I'm sure over the years too, being around students, around colleagues, and around people who are just generally interested in getting into these different types of industries. I
Right.
guess the most common question that it always goes to is like, how much? I mean, what does it really take to get into these industries to get started?
Uh, First, I think if you're starting out in the industry, like you're trying to get in as an artist, I feel like it's important to know first which industry you want to get into and be a very good consumer of that product, in terms of like just knowing what the landscape is, knowing uh, what you're going to be working for. So that's like, if any pre-qualifiers, that's definitely one that has to be there. Beyond that, you have to show that you can perform for those industries. So let's say it's games, right? You have to show that you can develop artwork for the property that you're going to um, be working for. And so there's three. There was like I was always presented with like three qualities that kind of stuck with me. It was being fast, having great work, like high quality work, or being just a friendly guy. And so if you can capture what that means for each industry, being fast, being quality, or being friendly, have two of those, and for the most part, that'll get you a good leg up in terms of like getting in. Um, I think over the years I've developed like I feel like there's one more factor there, and that's adaptability. So on top of being fast, on top of being really good, on top of being super friendly and being easy to work with, are you adaptable? Because these industries, like the games industry, the film industry, all these things are shifting all the time. New technologies like getting introduced. So how if you're trying to get in, first, are you good enough? And then can you adapt your style or your something about you to be able to fit the needs of a shifting industry? That's what I would say about that. Brandon?
Yeah. Sorry, I was on mute. So,
Yeah.
so us being in the industry for a while now, and the things that, at least the pattern that I see for a veteran such as yourself, and being in the industry myself for that amount of time, is the power to endure and sustain. I think if it's more, if we get just get paid for the craft, it's a lot. It's an easier conversation because then it would be just like, it's good work or not, right? But I think what makes it heavy is either the people or the other stuff when things don't go well, like when the office or the company or the project or something, all these other factors beyond just me and my craft, did I deliver, right? So my
Right.
question is, what keeps you going, man? Like, yeah, I think if we go by the traditional game dev life cycle, which is, I think you've heard of this, about this, like 5 years, right? 5 years is like the burnout rate
Hmm.
for most industry developers.
Yeah, I felt that around 5 years in. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So you lived four times
Yeah.
the life cycle of a game developer, if we were to factor that in.
Yeah.
So, do you mind kind of going through, like, let's craft this question into something very interesting. The 5, 10, 15, 20 year mark. Did you notice, like, each of those 5 years being monumentally different challenges?
There were definitely different challenges. One was like, I heard some of your older talks, and like you're talking about artist atrophy,
Mm-hmm.
and that definitely happened. And then life happened, uh, and then um, and then different phases, right? So it's more like in the beginning, it's more like I've learned everything in school, and I've kind of maxed that out. Everything in school I've learned, I've basically used that to my full potential, and I don't know where to go. So then I had to kind of expand out of that. And then over the years, it was more like my role, like as a concept artist, I've kind of expanded, like, and just exhausted all my resources, everything I learned in concept art over the first couple of years. Like I felt like I got to a point where I couldn't grow from there, and it was a hurdle to kind of overcome. So there are definitely sticking points like over the years.
And when you're talking about like life stuff happens, just like I think with age, that comes with it, right? Your circumstance changes,
Yeah,
or friends and family plays a big role
right.
into that.
Totally.
Was there any don't want to get too personal, any specifics besides that you would like
Well,
to share about, like, whoa, this is
okay. I
something I did
mean,
not anticipate going into
obviously,
this?
like, I mean, related to work, right? So, I mean, there were a couple of times when projects just, for whatever reason, they just get shut down, and you're not able to, no matter what you do as an artist or in your role, to be able to be excellent in that field. Just uh, decisions get made up top, and you're all of a sudden out of work, right? Things like that. And so what do you do? How can you? This is where adaptability comes in, is because you have to kind of be able to think on your feet and figure out, like, okay, well, everything I was doing was for this specific project or for this particular piece or subject matter, right? And then now that that's been stripped away from you, you have to kind of go back to the landscape and figure out, like, okay, what else is out there, and how can I gear all my work towards uh, something new, right? Things like that happen. That's happened a couple times. So
Right. And so how do you keep your art fresh and relatable with the new techniques that you said? There's this, like, momentum that you get from school where your instructors or mentors kind of lay it out for you, and say these are the things that you need to improve, and like you said, you reach to a point where you felt really good and comfortable about those things that you need to improve, and you started venturing kind of different industries of basically how to apply those in different ways.
Yeah.
How do you keep
Right.
yourself going and reinvent yourself so that you're not going stale?
Yeah. So I think one thing, I mean, a lot of reflection time, obviously, between those, like, um, it goes in waves. Sometimes you're really busy, but then other times where you have a lot of time to reflect. So I feel like as an artist, I've always been a good learner of like principles or craft. So for me, that was what I stuck to. When things hit a wall, I would find something else to about the industry that maybe I was weak on, and try to learn something new about it. So dive into a different style or dive into a different what I was consuming. I would try to consume different things and try to explore what else is in the landscape. What are people responding to? What kind of other maybe conventions or other events I could go to try and learn something that I haven't learned already. So I would dive into I'd try new things in that respect, and it kind of got me through. Sometimes it's altogether like completely different. Like I picked up cooking. I like to cook, so I stuck to cooking for a while. On the side, and then things I would pick up from cooking, I would actually bring back into the artwork, um, and apply it in on a higher level. So it's different for everyone.
Yeah, you got to expand that a bit. How do you take something so different like cooking and actually bring it back to the Cintiq?
Okay, so you can break down art into principles, right? Like you have value, you have color, right? You have shapes, and like things that you can do within your line work. There's different types of quality of the line that you can apply to any drawing or any painting, right? So learning how to itemize those valuable pieces of the art and put them together. I always think of it as like ingredients, right? So if you so you have your recipe, like let's say, like we're looking at Ni no Kuni right now. So let's say Ni no Kuni has a certain recipe of elements in art, right? It's line heavy, right? It's more about there's not so much like heavy form shadow lighting. It's much more about the design of the character. So that has to be strong. Silhouette has to be strong. And so there's these items that you can kind of list, right? And so from a cooking standpoint, that would be your base, like soup, right? Or like you have your main ingredients that you want to put in a soup. And then how do you make it your own? You got these different flavors, right? It's like, what are you trying? Yes, like a couple of days ago, I added strawberries to a tomato paste, right? To actually punch up the flavor. So you can do the same things with your art. Like, what are some like little things that you haven't tried that you could spice up for like if you're playing around with line work, if you're doing something very line heavy, how can you add this other layer to it that maybe no one has thought of, like, to kind of add into the mix. So that could be content. It could be something that you're trying in terms of how you put down a stroke. It could be your line weight. It could be all these things, and like you just have to like really dive deep and like be creative in that sense. So to answer your question.
Of course. So, I mean,
That's
you
yeah.
clearly are showing. I'm just showing some of your work, man. Some I haven't even seen yet. So, it's like what a dope ass line, dude. So you're obviously qualified. You're obviously really excellent at what you do. And we talked about a bit how you kind of played around with jumping different industries, kind of keep those challenges up for yourself so you're not bored, because it sounds like
Mhm.
too like that can easily happen. And the way you're
Oh
talking about
yeah.
how food can go back into your 2D artwork is definitely something, at least highlights how much of a better artist you are than me. Because I do not think like that at all. I don't go back and look at my ramen that I'm cooking that day and be like, how do I make my better 3D art from this?
That's hilarious. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's just me.
But what
That's my way of dealing with things. It's I don't think everyone has the same path for sure. Like
But when you
you
explain
probably,
it to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's like your brain
yeah,
is kind of configured in a way that you can piece things together and then it just clicks. And so when you do bring it back into your tablet or Cintiq or drawing board, you start to see these patterns, that your brain just gets practice from all this other art form that you're kind of
mm,
experimenting. And to me, it makes total sense because it gives you the break that you need. Because I think a lot of artists are
yeah.
so hunched over all the time
Oh
and
yeah. Well,
get tunnel
that's the
vision.
5 year mark, right? That's
Yep.
exactly the 5 year mark
Yep.
because you're so comfortable doing a thing, right? Like you've gotten to a routine of uh, making a high quality piece, and you have a certain method of doing that, and you do the same thing, and that's how you get it done, right? But you're so used to that doing that same thing over and over and over. It's like nothing's new. It's kind of boring, right? So that's like how I kind of learned how to take it to another level, maybe.
And have you talked to other, artists or developers, um, that shares the same amount of years for advice? Like, what are the best and worst advice that you've gotten from these people when we're kind of approaching past the 5 year mark, the 10 year mark now, let's say, as for an example, and you're just looking for like, wow, is I made it through or past the graveyard of developers? I would say 60% of developers who felt the burn didn't come back
Mm-hmm.
from the grave, right? But now
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the little like 40 or 25% of the people who survived that. But I'm also feeling that dip of like, you know, and I also feel this way like around the 7-10 year mark. You, especially in the game industry, you've reached the salary cap of what you can
Yeah,
earn
yeah,
in your position,
sure, yeah,
and it's like, all right, money's not the motivator anymore. Yeah, I mean, I've been lead, I've been in these different positions, but it's just a title, really, at this point,
right, yeah. I
with
know, I
this
totally agree.
with
Yeah.
with a different level of type of bullshit that comes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the challenges is that
So
really. Yeah.
yeah, right. So it's a marathon, right? And so how do you um, there's different ways of countering it, I guess, and I really think it's case by case. Everyone's got a different story to tell and different struggles to go through. So some are like I kind of feel like it also starts with what you were passionate about in the beginning. Like I have a friend who we connected on art because we were both really passionate about art, and training in that respect. And so we would struggle through over the years. We kind of struggle together about different things that we were. And, you just bond that way. You'd have like long conversations about art and what it means to be an artist in these fields and like what other like yeah like what else is going on and how people are approaching it, and then why am I so frustrated doing what I do, and how can I benefit, like how can I be of value. So lots of conversations around that. But other people, like I've talked to, like they really just they're not, so they don't need that interaction as much. Like they work on their own, right? And so what they would do is just when they're feeling it, they take like a 6 month sabbatical and like just travel Europe for like 6 months, and not do anything, and then they come back all refreshed and like good to go. So it's different for everyone. Um,
Have you tried
that's kind
that?
of
Have you gone
I've
through?
done a little, yeah, I've done a little bit of traveling, and it does help for sure. You get like, so much exposure to things you would never think about uh, here, like for us, it's in the States, right? So, but yeah, like traveling to Barcelona was awesome, and traveling to these different places in Europe were really eye opening. Like you get different tastes of culture, and kind of some insights of how people live over there, and it's very different, and also what you learn about what people aspire towards, and visiting museums, like you get to see a glimpse of what they're inspired by. So it opens your mind that way for sure. I was able to see for like I was I guess this is kind of related to my path. Was I got to see people like Dali or Picasso, and just see their journey, like in over a lifetime, and I think that was really helpful for me because like I got to see how much more love they put into their work than say someone that's working uh, for a game, as a just a 9 to 5, right? It's a there's a huge level of difference in how much passion and how much more uh, like dedication they put into their work. Like down, like so. And let me know if I'm going. If you want to move on to another topic, but
No,
like
keep
I got to
expanding. Yeah.
see Gaudi, right, for instance, in Barcelona, and like he's an architect, just as like he did the Sagrada Familia, but he spent like 10 to yeah, at least 10 to 20 years on like one building, or in his final like masterpiece, like the Sagrada Familia, he spent like 40 years of his life living at the place, working on this one building or one tower of one building, and they're still working on it to finish it. And so, like looking at the details, like you would look at you could find pictures online, obviously, and it's beautiful, but and you could see like gotta get a glimpse of like how it feels. But when you go into the details, like, and you actually talk to people about how it was made, like, and the choices of material and why he like every decision he made was like considered. And then so like in he built this house, and like in one of the windows even, like um man, down to the window handle, or like the like what you use to like open the window.
Oh, all right. I think we slowly just lost him for a second. Everybody, just hang
And
on.
it's just like gets so
There we go.
intricate, and like yeah, it's like so beautifully done that it's like really eye opening.
Yeah, we just lost you for like 2 seconds, but I think we got
Oh really?
a good amount
Okay.
of that. Don't worry. I think. I guess my question is like I think concept artist does this a little better than most other types of artists, where we get inspiration and motivation by actually visiting these sites. I think it's very easy
Hmm.
to kind of just Google search a lot of this and just it's not just
Yeah.
it's not the same
Right.
type of feeling. It's not the same type of inspiration. Just hearing a story where an artist was spending 20 years on a particular piece.
Yeah.
It's not
But
something
it's
a digital
also
artist does anymore.
yeah, no, it's like, and who has the time to, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, just going there and learning these things, like you kind of get a glimpse into a lot of their philosophies and why they would make these decisions as well. And so I feel like maybe not down to the nitty gritty, but just understanding their philosophy about behind why they would do something. Coming back to the artwork, I kind of apply some of that thinking. like why yeah, understanding why you would do something, as opposed to just getting getting an assignment and doing it.
And so that definitely gave you another boost past the 10-year mark. Is it something that you feel like is going to sustain an artist, just continuously getting inspiration by physically visiting these masters? I guess the question
I don't
is like, does that ever? Do you feel like that? Well,
I don't think that's
I
the only answer. No, I
okay.
don't think that's the only answer.
Well, so what other
I
advice do you have with that?
Again, it's case by case. Yeah, I really think like everyone's going through different things. So um, yeah, probably too many avenues to explore there.
Well, what other avenues do you feel like
Uh,
other artists usually? Because the ability to go visit a landmark or a beautiful just remnants of a master's work can feel out of reach for some.
oh yeah.
I highly recommend it. I'm probably the least traveled person you'll ever met, but it's not like I don't want to. Obviously, I would want to. I would love to. How else would that be reachable if they don't have that access to kind of boost
um,
themselves out of that rut?
you, the easiest thing would be to go to a gathering where people of different disciplines or different cultures meet, and then ask them questions about their experience. And if there's a topic that you agree on or relate to, then asking questions about that, and then you'll probably find that they have some different experiences and different things that uh, they have learned over the years. So I think just being open to that is extremely valuable.
So these meetups that you're talking
I
about.
mean, this could, yeah, like GDC,
Mhm.
or like, yeah, and or what else, E3, or like, games. We're talking about games, so yeah, game developers conferences, like, there's all sorts of talks like this one, or like the guy that you just posted before, about different topics. Um, but yeah, I think like meetup.com, I've explored a little bit. I should more, but it's really a matter of like how much time I have these days. So, but yeah, if I had more time, I would definitely go to meetup.com and like explore some of the different interests and different meetups that are going on. Uh, like there's different resources, like Airbnb has experiences you can try, and local newspaper, you know, Yellow Pages, I guess.
Yellow. I don't think I ever seen. I haven't seen a yellow page for a long time, dude. Not just the phone book, just like a yellow
Yeah,
page, and no one uses
but
stationery as much.
but part of that is, I mean, before even going through that, I think there does need to be some kind of reflection in terms of what is it that you feel like you want to grow in, or is there something that you feel frustrated about that you could maybe address? Because if you don't have that in mind, then and you go to these places, like there's there's no intention there. There's no real, like, you don't know what you're looking for, so you're probably not going to learn as much if you don't have that prep work, I guess.
Well, this is a interesting point right here, actually. So I think when we start going into the industry, at least I had a hard time kind of taking feedback, which was my like arrogant young blood type of like I
Yeah.
whatever, right? But then it took a while for me, like, well, this is a group type of project, and he knows way better than I do, or she knows way better than I do, and it's kind of group effort because we are going to put it out there to millions or thousands or whatever who's going to see this. So it's always good to get find a middle ground, right, without
Mhm.
sacrificing the expression. But then now later in my career, it's like, well, this guy, I'm back to like this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I know where. Do you find yourself in a similar type of journey now that you have 20 years plus years in your belt, and as we've seen with your artwork, it's like, what is it to critique about? Yeah, they like it or you don't, and it must be tough, kind of take directions at this point in your career. I mean, how? I mean, and draining too. So how did you been dealing with that?
I can see that happening. Yeah, but I feel like they've grown too. I mean, I feel like when I work with someone, haven't seen them for a couple years, and then work with them again. Most of the time, they're in a different place too. So I kind of just read, kind of engage and approach it that way. Like, hey, we're in a new situation. What is it that I've learned that I could provide? And are they doing a good job, and where are they doing a good job? If there's something that I'm maybe qualities that they had that were maybe I would consider annoying, then how can I like maybe what can I bring to the table that would counter that or would add to the value of the product regardless. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of that would be my approach.
I mean, that's a very political way of going about it for sure. But it is definitely one of those things that I think
But
working with
I think it's
a
also
group, yeah.
our experiences, right? Because like I think production's a little bit more. You probably see a lot more of that kind of stuff happening. And my experiences have been more on the blue sky area and more like on the like upfront development. So I guess there hasn't been that much as much of those dynamics, and if they are there, they're either above or below. Like meaning like things happen on the business side. I'm sure there's all sorts of battles that happen over there, and outside of like they get it to a point where it's developable, and that so we do our job and they just like develop a project, and then after that it hands off to production. So, and I'm sure when you're in the trenches like that, a lot more stuff might happen. But like for concept and development, it's much more just like crank out the work and then get the ball rolling on in terms of how the uh, uh, defining the project or defining the look of the project or whatnot. So I think that it minimizes maybe some of those dynamics.
And concept art usually does the kickoff of any project or engagement, right? So, can you kind of speak on the experiences where, especially with your roles changing? You've been art director, you've been lead, you've been a senior artist, you've been all over. Um, how that kind of ties in at the end? I mean, have you found yourself at the tail end of things where you're kind of just making sure that the original vision is being delivered correctly in all disciplines? I guess that's the art director role, right? Just like
Mm.
I painted it this way, and you guys didn't do it right. This is how you
my
do it.
my art my art director experience admittedly is limited. I wasn't managing big teams or anything, so I didn't have to deal with uh, heavy people dynamics and all the personalities that are involved with that. So I think in terms of following direction, it was and delivering direction, it was much smoother in that sense. Like basically, uh, things needed to get done more like almost like a startup level, and so I would just kind of try and cover my bases that way. So the stress is more like what have we developed a finished product, and is has the vision been carried out enough to where it can handle all of those aspects of the product. So I think that's where the challenge is for maybe a startup development. But something like on a bigger project, I guess that your responsibility is slightly more limited, or if they are that big, then you have a lot of responsibility in terms of like managing people, and so that's like there's a whole another set of challenges there. So
Well, on the subject of challenges and the survivability of an artist, I think a big component to that never really gets talked about as much, or at least shared from a mentor to a student or anybody within the industry, is the people aspect. It's just I always tell this to my business partner, my friend, or anybody that is willing to listen out there, that people are variables. That's they have such a huge impact on your career, on your personal projects. You can plan it out as best you can, but if people come with their problems, it just really tosses everything
oh yeah.
on a loop. So how has your dynamic changed from the beginning of your career, the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark? Like, have you found it getting easier, or are you still going back at the end of the day and be like, oh, this MFer just made it a little tougher?
That stuff happens less and less. I think because the more you work on projects, the more you find the people that you like working with, and they like working with you, so they rehire you to work on things. And then so as long as you're doing good work and you're friendly, or you're connecting with people that match your personality, I guess, then the more that you work, like the less that you'll see those kind of things happen. So, and the challenge becomes more about the project itself rather than, this motherfucker or this guy like that you didn't get along with early on, right? Those kind of things are, I think, things that you work out in the first 5 years, and then you'll connect to the people that you really connect with, and those just if you stick with them, like they'll kind of keep you going through the next however long. So that's what I found.
Mm-hmm. It really does become a game upon itself. Working with people, forming alliances, subconsciously or consciously within a workplace. And I've seen this, I guess, in bigger studios, and less so in smaller studios. But because a lot of times when you go in the smaller studios, you are there mostly because you know someone, right? Especially late in your career, right? Making that type of strategic move, it's because, hey, I know someone that's there. Might be a fun thing. You never really go out there and apply, oh, do I want to work on the next Call of Duty, or do I want to work on this obscure title that no one ever heard of with people I never worked with, whose resume I can't even find. So
hey, there's something, there are definitely values to that too. Like I've definitely worked on projects that were maybe considered more obscure, or like no one else would ever work on that. But there was something about it that I was drawn to, that I felt like, okay, this could be really cool for me learning something new. And I think that's where kind of my strength is learning something about something that I would have more patience for, that maybe someone else might not.
Have you found this pretty useful among your competitiveness or competitors within a workplace? Just having the patience to kind of see things through and not different. Be.
Yeah. I can't say it's better or worse. That's just kind of just being accepted of myself, and moving forward that way, and then seeing where things go.
What are the biggest difference between a 10-year artist versus a 15? What was the biggest thing that you saw change on a personal level, where you're like, yeah, I'm visiting these museums, I'm visiting around the world, I reinvigorated my passion for art and learning. Uh, but I'm hitting the 15-year mark or 20-year mark now, and it's like do I? It's always a reset button because 3 to 5 years is usually when we look for new jobs. I don't know
Yeah,
too many people that are staying within the same job for 5, 10 years. If they do,
yeah,
that's great. But somehow they've settled uh,
yeah.
and not
And
really
I think maybe
changing.
hmm, I can't speak for everyone, because I don't know how they think or what they're going through. But my experience was 5 to 10 or 7 to 10 years in. I think I was a little bit more competitive, and it took me another 6 or 7 years to get over that competitiveness, and that's a really hard thing to do. Um, and then being able to uh, be more focused on team, that's actually pretty hard challenge. Uh, you could say it, and it's like there's things that they do to promote that, but to actually install that into your working method as a, like, let's say a freelance artist or someone who was more on the art side and less on working with development or like on production, that kind of thing. It's teamwork is actually not the easiest thing to learn, in those situations. So I feel like that was a big hurdle for me. So
No, I definitely can relate to that. I think within our close circles, the concept team is kind of similar to. Well, I mean, the environment team is usually the biggest team. But within the environment team, we're not hanging out with like 20, 30 plus people. It's usually within our
mhm.
cliques, which is 4 to 5, within our arm reach. And yeah, it took me a while to stop being competitive. I think the first formative years is like a learning experience, of course. You're trying to establish yourself on a junior level, so there is a slight competition there. And then when you get into mid-level to senior, you're kind of looking around to see who's the fastest, who's the best quality.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
And job security becomes a real thing because now you have family and mouths to feed. So
Yeah.
it's more like, all right, how do I, shine myself a better light than this person next to me? Uh, and then years after, it's like, oh my God, we're all going to get laid off anyways. Who cares?
Yeah, and then the younger generation comes in, right? And
Yeah.
then basically, all these guys are getting kicked out of their jobs because this younger, fresher, cheaper person can do everything that the older guy can do. So yeah, it's like that's where adaptability really comes into play. It's like how can you uh, survive in that with those kind of dynamics?
So I have a question here from Indie Game Biz, our partner for this 3-day conference. The question is, what recommendations? Sorry, I'm gibbering right now. What recommendations do you have for younger people who want to learn more about the art side of the industry, 8 to 12 years old in particular? And this is actually, I want to tag on to that.
12. Oh,
Yeah, the a lot of the electives now, in at least in the United States, have been taken out. I think there's still basics of drawing within the classroom, but art in particular has been taking a hit. So how do you recommend the youngins get into this, where they can at least help themselves pave a
well, I
path?
would say, I mean, 8 to 12 years old. I feel like that's something that would be a good thing to show interest with your parents and say, hey, I want to pursue this, and they might have a better idea of like how to connect to the right people. Um, but on top of that, there's different things you can research. There's a lot of free tutorials online in terms of how to draw. Uh, you can look into schools, like trade schools, that that are specific to maybe an area of focus. If it is concept, then there's definitely concept art schools that you can go to, um, and you can research about that. But if it's just drawing, there's also, there's drawing schools specifically for that too. So it just depends like where where you want to grow. So that's definitely a conversation to have with your parents. And you know, I think it would be a good bonding experience, and it would be a good way to kind of get them on the same page of where you want to go. And as I feel like that's where teamwork can be installed too. So,
Mm-hmm. And I
and then
definitely
you
go
chime
ahead.
in if you agree. Yeah.
I totally disagree. No, I'm kidding.
As a
Well,
parent yourself, right? So,
as a parent myself, I at least having some perspective in this industry. I think there's two types of drawings, and maybe you have a better, broader view on this, where if there's not much of a future of a kid sitting there drawing Donald Duck all day, right? Sure, they're getting the practice and getting the trick, but like I would want to tailor that towards more commercial type of art. So I mean,
the other thing I would add to that,
yeah,
8 to 12, you should be drawing every day.
every
You
day.
have all the free time in the world, so draw as much as you can and draw the things that you really love to draw.
So start
If
with
you're eight
that.
to
Okay.
ten, yeah, if you're 8 to 12 years old and you're listening to this and you're serious about it, you should already have a few things that you already love to draw. So I would suggest drawing just for me it was Spider-Man, for me it was Garfield. I was like all over the map, like drawing cartoons, like watching Looney Tunes, and just diving into the artwork and like copying stuff for a while, before I learned that, hey, there's an actual education. You can actually go to school for this stuff. Like up until like I didn't even know there was school for art, but I loved comics and I loved cartoons and I loved video games. So I drew whatever I could. Whatever inspired me to draw, I would just draw that.
So
And
let
then
me
that became
let me tag into that, right? So if
yeah.
you were to go back, knowing what you know now, knowing the career path and how fruitful it could be, you going back to that 12-year-old Kinman Chan and be like, hey, I see that you're drawing a lot of Spider-Man, but here is a more clear path to optimize your time. What would you say to that 12-year-old to, like, instead of wandering
I
around
would,
drawing all sorts of
yeah.
things, what's a better path there?
For me, I wouldn't tell myself anything because I was too stubborn as a kid. I was too stubborn to listen to anyone else. So, um, yeah, I can't say much more about that. I was just a very stubborn kid.
So yeah, they're like a
So
perfect.
no matter what, I was gonna draw whatever I was gonna draw at that
Right,
point.
right.
So
Well,
yeah, if I were more, if I knew that I was more receptive to listening, I guess, and I had to talk myself something, hmm, I'd say um, open open yourself up to different ways of learning. There's a lot of wisdom in like growing up. I actually didn't like Disney drawings, uh, but like later on, like I learned how valuable Disney drawings were, and like how important those methods of drawing became to, and like were such a core for my foundation. And yeah, I guess like being open to different methods and also having the discipline to stick to a method that maybe you don't agree with in the beginning.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and look at the like kind of have the ability to look at the results, and if you like the results, study that method and be willing to adapt to that method, like for a time, until you can get to that level, to that thing that you loved about it, and then you can move on.
Mm-hmm. So my last question here, and this is kind of like cornering into 20-year mark here, I imagine at this point you're kind of taking a look around, and um, recent years is a little better, but this, we're starting to approach like we used to be the young one in the studio, and now we're the older ones. And
Yeah.
there's not that much older people that sticks around, and it's this
Mm.
constant thing that I always see when I'm working within the studio, right? Like what? I mean, that's something that just never get really taught. You either swing with it, or you don't, and you hang with the crowd as much as you can. But at some point, you're like, man, where did all the older people go?
That's
Because
that's exactly what I was looking at. Ask. Where did they go? Like, I have no idea.
yeah, I mean, like, have you given this much thought? Because I look around the studio, it's like it's not like I gave them a send off or a goodbye. I mean, they weren't even near the retirement age or anything. It's just that they're
Yeah.
gone or working at smaller places or just hanging on for daily life. It's just something that HR doesn't really help us.
Yeah. Some people I have no idea. Like, and then other people, it's like I know a good chunk of them became leads or became like more in like director management positions, uh, or moved on to take care of the kids or something like that. Like they're just too busy to interact, right? So I don't know where you're going about that question, but that's that's
Well,
kind of
I'm saying we're old.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And as
definitely
it's a young type of industry as far as I can tell. And
right.
and I feel like a lot of the at least senior level elites are kind of exiting games, or at least working at
Mm.
Facebook or Oculus, or working at Google, something a little more stable where it's less competitive. I'm not saying they're settling, but in a way, it's that seems to be where the market is heading. At least people who are maturing or has a family, they're looking less about the risk. I mean, they're looking
Yeah, I
more at the
feel
risk and taking less of it. Yeah.
yeah. I see from my perspective, I see that games are transitioning more into immersive developments. So like AR and VR is becoming like a bigger thing. Uh, in games is like I feel like there's uh, like a really high bar of quality in games. So if you're trying to get in, like good luck. It's really hard at this point. But at the same time, I feel like those guys are like super high bar and at lead positions, so they're cranking out great work. And so the games industry as a whole, like it's consistent, right? It's so you have your audience, you have like the solid products that are coming out, so uh, it's still a strong industry to be in. But yeah, definitely like it is transitioning now that there's more opportunities. Streaming is becoming a thing. AR and VR is becoming like more relevant slowly, and so I feel like people are jumping into these new avenues. Yeah, it's exciting. It's pretty exciting time.
Yeah, definitely, man. There's definitely a lot of avenues. I'm glad, and not to kind of just. I'm celebrating the fact that developers are finding places that they can stay and feel secure at, and not having to worry about the product, the end product, being the future of their employment. Like, it's great to have
Mm.
a company like Facebook or Google whose main revenue stream is not games, because games again
Right?
is,
Yeah.
is so unpredictable.
Oh yeah.
Where our business model, and I think we talked about this a bit with Yashka at the beginning of today's conference, where the business model needs to adapt and change, where we're not waiting on 2-3 days, 2-3 years after the product is shipped to see if it's
Yeah.
something worth pursuing.
Right. It's pretty unless you're like a Naughty Dog or like something huge like that has made a name for themselves. It's pretty hard to survive in that kind of environment.
Yeah, Definitely. Well, Kinman Chan, I am so happy for you to kind of guide us through the apocalypse of of an artist. It is a real thing that I felt for a long time. I think I was with the there after the 5 year mark where the burnout rate was very real. Hit the 10 year mark, I was very different in my own experience where I didn't even bother playing the game that I worked on. You know, that was a really
Yeah.
different type of. It's like, yeah, it's out.
Yeah,
Next.
well, I mean that's the thing about working on a project or a subject matter for so long. It's like you get so numb to it,
Yep.
right? So even I guess bringing it back to the art, right? So in the beginning, you're learning about how anatomy, right, and how to draw a figure, like, and then you do that enough, you draw thousands of figures, right, and it gets to a point where it's kind of second nature. You don't think about it anymore. So where it gets really fun, like you have to find new things about it that are fun. So for me, it was like diving into comics and learning about posing or like different things from a writing standpoint that you could do with a figure. And so it might be like drawing a figure that's like, well, it actually, the first couple of years is more about like drawing figures in really expressive poses, like action packed, like fighting, or really extreme, like um, motions or moves, or just fantastical things. And then I feel like it evolved to someone drinking coffee, or like could be really interesting. And how do you draw that? Like I don't know, it evolves, but you have to find something about it that fuels you, rather than just making it a second nature thing and doing the same thing over and over. So for games, I can see if you're doing something like Call of Duty over and over, you're so familiar with that subject matter. You don't want to draw another like military guy like in a desert. So, what are some ways you can make it interesting? I don't know. After
Mm.
so many years, it might be hard to surround yourself around. You probably have to try and travel or do something like,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I guess I have one last question before I send you off. Um, just to kind of ask for your thoughts about this in your own personal journey. We're both artists, of course. I'm in the 3D, you're in the 2D world. And
Mhm.
you're bringing up Call of Duty. Well, I mean, I did feel that. I did feel that at a certain point.
Yeah.
Um, but for me too, I took a step back. It was less about the subject, but more about my overall well-being. It was more like,
uh,
do I want to be one of 300? This is a project that probably would survive without me or exist without me. And I was at a point where it's like, I need to work on something because I got opinions, I got ideas too, that
mm,
needs to be expressed. And if I don't go out and try it, this idea, this product in my mind won't exist. Like I hit, at least that was my 10 year mark, where I felt
mm,
like I didn't want to be a part of a big project anymore. I just completely, it wasn't burnt out. It's just I didn't see uh, an impact as much as I thought I would.
oh
Like,
yeah. Or you didn't place importance on impact as much as
that
you're
too.
growing as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just
Something
like,
like that.
I started this with like, how do you tailor the kids to make money out of this passion of their where they're drawing Donald Ducks into commercial art, because that's the viable option right there to turn it into a career, right? But then
Mhm.
after doing commercial art for so long, it's like, oh my god, it's just I'm not downplaying that there is a lot of things you can learn by creating commercial art, but
Yeah.
the definition of
it is
commercial.
always
It's a
yeah,
team thing.
it's
It's a
always exciting for sure.
yes,
It's always exciting.
yeah,
It's always exciting, but
R-
definitely like I could see like you're focused on a subject for
mhm,
so many years. Even though
mhm.
the projects themselves are exciting in that field, it's like you're just bored of the field, right?
Yeah, yep, yep.
So
And this is
yeah,
something, yeah,
so
I definitely see when you're talking. It definitely resonates with me. It's the subject matter is great, but there's that people quality to it where it's like too many people, and then
mm,
the idea to express myself gets lost, right? Because it's that classic example of too many too many hands on the final product, right? Where it gets kind of uh,
oh
malformed from its original creation,
sure,
right?
yeah, right.
It's a bunch of people
What
touching
made
your
it
clay model.
exciting? Yeah,
What made it exciting, and I see that a lot with team effort. And on smaller teams, it becomes. I feel it's more pure in terms of
oh
the
yeah,
expression,
for sure.
but there is definitely a lesson there with bigger games where their whole marketing department and stuff that I think needs to be still factored in smaller
Oh yeah,
projects, because you can't just sit there and do your best art but no one buys it, right? You're not going to do
yeah,
that forever. So there's a
right.
balance there that I'm slowly learning from all my big commercial jobs, but at the same time it's disheartening to kind of go through that path with so many people.
Right. It's yeah, I feel like and working in big environments versus working in small environments, there are different challenges. There's different advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
So uh,
Well,
I mean,
Kinman
I can
Chan,
touch on that, but
well,
yeah.
we'll definitely got to do a part two of this for sure. Thanks for kind of joining in and being part of this GDEX. This is also part of the time where if you want to throw some people your way, where can they check you out? Either an art station, uh, let them know.
Yeah, I mean, I have an ArtStation account and I have an Instagram. ArtStation, both you can search for Kincept, Kincept. I don't post as much as I'd like to, just because I'm so busy. But if I were to update, those would be the places to update. So